All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started on stage one of sound design. And stage one is implementing the whooshes for the movement. So when it comes to stage one, whenever you get to a point where you finish the animations inside of your video, so you finish the raw footage, you finish the text, you finish the animations, and now you want to sound design everything, the first thing you need to sound design is your movements. And this is probably like where you set up your base layer. You set up the base layer, which is the movements, so that you can build upon it with all the rest of these sound effects, okay? So how do we go about this? The first thing you need to understand is that stage one is split into two sections. It is number one, watching and understanding what a movement is, and it is number two, applying and adding the whooshes and applying them into your edit. Also, in between these stages, there is a phase where you're going to have to go out and choose whooshes, which we're also going to be replicating now. So quickly, let's start with the first phase, which is what is a movement? Well, let me quickly show you guys a few different types of movements. The first thing I'm going to do over here is I'm going to create a quick shape layer and show you guys what the movements are. And I'm going to show you how they look better and why they sound better with whooshes. So I'm going to quickly add a transform effect over here, and I'm going to add this transform effect to our block. I'm going to keyframe its position somewhere around this point right here, and I'm going to have it start on the left side like so, and I'm just going to have it end on the right side like so. It's just going to be a block moving from the left to the right side. And also I'm going to create a spike, if you guys remember this, in the velocity to make it look a lot better, and increase the motion blur. So this is what our movement looks like. This is number one. I'm going to show you guys a few different kinds. So this is movement number two. Our starting point is going to be off the screen like so, and our end point is going to be in the middle of the screen like this. Then this is movement number three. Our starting point, whoops, what happened here? Like that. Okay, and we're just going to have it start quick because this is moving off the screen into the screen like this. And then over here, we're going to do the exact same thing. It's just that we're going to have it start in the bottom. So this one starts at the bottom and then ends in the middle of the screen like this. You guys don't need to replicate these animations. You just need to understand how they are made, okay? All right, let me quickly just fix this up. And there we go. Awesome. So I don't need to explain this to you guys. You guys already know them. These are three different kinds of movements, and movements kind of look something like this. So whenever there's an object moving on the screen, moving from outside the screen into our screen, or an object moving from the bottom to the center of our screen like this, or even the last case, which I have not shown you guys yet, which could just be even a zoom in. Like if I keyframe the scale and have it go up to something like 160, and then I just animate this, this in and of itself can literally be its own movement. Okay? Something like this is a movement as well. So with this being said, guys, these are four different kinds of movements. Movements happening on the screen, like something moving from one position to the other. Another kind of movement is a movement happening off the screen into the screen, so something popping in from off the screen into the screen. Another movement is also off the screen into the screen, pop-ups, pop-downs, pop-ins, and the third movement is a zoom-in. This is a third kind of movement. So if you guys want to understand movements, there are just these three kinds of movements. It is either movement on the screen, it's either movement outside the screen into the screen, or it's movement of a zoom in on the screen. So whenever you see these in your edits, you see any kind of icon, for example, moving from one position to the other, understand that that is a movement and instantly assign movement whoosh. That's all you have to understand. Movement equals whoosh. I need to add a whoosh for that. The second kind of movement, whenever you see anything pop into your screen, like a slide in, always assume this is a movement and instantly just like equate this formula in your mind. This movement equals a whoosh, right? If it's moving from outside the screen into the screen, I need to add a whoosh for it. And the same thing for the last one, any kind of zoom in, instantly equate that in your mind as a movement. And remember, movement equals whoosh. Always add a whoosh for this. So whenever you're watching the edit, phase one, which is watching the edit and looking for those movements where you can add these sound effects, right? As you're watching through your edit, always remember, these are the three kinds of movements I'm looking for. If there's something moving on the screen inside of it, that's a movement. If there's something moving from outside the screen into the screen, that is a movement. And if there's something scaling in or zooming in on the screen, then that is also a movement. So if we go back to our edit over here and we quickly watch through it just to practice this, what parts of this are a movement? I'm going to quickly mute everything just so that we can focus. The first thing we have is a zoom in. And a zoom in is a kind of movement, right? So over here, we start with a zoom in. That's a scale in. This is a kind of movement. The second thing we have is these two pop-ups over here. So we have two objects sliding into the screen. These are movements, right? The third thing we have is another pop-up over here. So they slide off as well. That's also a movement. Then we have a pop-up. This is also a movement, right? What else do we have? Then here we've got a zoom in, which is also a movement. So you guys notice there's a lot of movement happening on the screen. Movements are, remember, either something moving on the screen like this, right? Something moving on the screen like this, so into the screen, excuse me, or it's something moving from outside the screen into the screen, just like this rectangle here. So this is a good example. You guys can see the video and the text are moving from outside the screen into the screen, which is a movement. Or lastly, it can even be a zoom in like this, which is also a movement. All three of these are movements, and let's see exactly how we bring them to life. The way we bring them to life is we get whooshes. How are you supposed to get whooshes? Well, I'm going to be using Epidemic Sound for this tutorial. If you guys want to get it for free, you can sign up with the presets and plugins. If not, you can get these same sound effects on YouTube. All I have to do is head over to the sound effects section and search up for something like whoosh. Now, when you search up for whooshes, you're going to have a lot of results. Oh, excuse me. Should probably get that fixed. So when you search up for whooshes, you're going to have a lot of results, and you can play through all of them and give them a listen. Now, with whooshes, they differ in a few ways. The first way that whooshes differ is some whooshes are longer than others. Like this one is a pretty quick one, and this one is a pretty quick one. Whereas this one is a way slower one. This one's also pretty quick. So the first way that whooshes differ is that some of them are quicker than others. So it depends on the length of the movement. If I have a box that takes 5 seconds to move across the screen, I'm not going to add a 3-second whoosh or 2-second whoosh to it. I need a full 5-second whoosh. If I have a box that just takes 1 second to move on the screen, then I obviously need a way quicker whoosh. And it kind of applies to real life as well. When you have a car that zooms past you very quickly, the sound is like that, and then it keeps going, right? If you remove the sound of a car or like the sound of a bullet that's passing by, it's always super quick, because the faster an object moves, the smaller that whoosh has to be. Whereas if you have something slowly moving past you, like a big, a big wave or a big wave of wind that's going past you, it's a very slow whoosh. It's a like that, right? Almost like the difference between a bullet and a car. So if a bullet passes by, it's like, right, it's done. Whereas a car, it's like it has to take its time to pass by. So when it comes to whooshes, the length of the whoosh depends on the length of your movement animation. And as you guys see over here, our movement animations, they are pretty slow, right? Look at how slow that is. So I can't add a quick whoosh to this, and we'll see a few examples real quick. This one as well, and then this one as well. Now, the other way that whooshes differ is that they also differ in intensity. Some whooshes are soft. Sorry, excuse me. Let's repeat that one more time. This is not a soft whoosh. This is a more harsh whoosh. But if I were to show you a softer whoosh, like that's a very harsh whoosh, right? Whereas that's way softer. So notice the difference between some whooshes is some of them are harsher and some of them are softer. Where are you supposed to be using them? Well, let me show you a quick example. So with this rectangle, you would probably say that this rectangle is moving. You don't know if it's soft or harsh. If I quickly duplicated it, and I'm just going to make a quick duplicate, and I'm going to move the anchor point just so that we have a different one here, right? Just kind of like this. The reason I'm moving the anchor point is so that I don't affect the position. And so all I'm going to do is literally just make this thing more intense. Okay, now I want you guys to watch through them and tell me which one is harsher. Right? One of them requires a whoosh that's like slow. So if we watch this slow one over here in the bottom, this one is a slow movement. Nice and slow. But if we watch this top one alone, look at how harsh that movement is. So one of them seems like it requires a sound effect that's like, right? And the other one needs like something that's like harsh, like a harsh hit. And the way that we understand this when it comes to editing is we just look at our velocity spike. So our velocity spike over here, if it's a big harsh spike like this, then you understand it needs a harsh whoosh. Whereas if it's a soft spike like this, you understand it just needs a medium whoosh. And if it's a softer spike, something like this, then you understand you need a really soft whoosh for this. Like this thing over here would use a very, very soft whoosh, okay? So with this being said, you guys need to also learn to interpret these velocity spikes as your whoosh. So whenever you have movements, you're always going to see these velocity spikes. Like if we go back to our movement over here, you guys can see this one's pretty okay, but this one's very harsh. And the same goes with this one. This one's pretty okay. Whereas over here, like for our icon, the pop-up, where's the icon? Where's the icon? This one's the icon, yeah. So for the icon pop-up, if we quickly open up our nest, you guys can see it's pretty harsh in the beginning. So we have to, first of all, interpret how velocities work and how whooshes are aligned. So with this being said, whenever you're collecting whooshes, you want to collect whooshes which are according to the size of your movement. And number two, according to the intensity of your movement. These are the two most important ones. And once you have those down, the rest is pretty easy. The last part is what the difference between whooshes is. You have different kinds of whooshes. So you have a regular whoosh, which is just wind passing by. So something like this and like this. And then you have something called, for example, you could go with different textures. So like things like electric whooshes, and you guys will be learning how to use these and stylize them in your edits, right? Stuff like this. Stuff like this. I'll show you a really good one that I like these. These are electric whooshes which you can use. Then you also have things like, I think they've got metallic whoosh, I believe. Yeah. That, for example, is a metallic whoosh. You have a bunch of different kind of whooshes, and you can use all different kinds depending on the kind of animation. Obviously, if I had a animation that's like all UI and tech and confusing, I wouldn't use a wind whoosh with it. I would use an electric whoosh because that fits the brand and style of the video. So for that reason, whenever you're using whooshes and sound design, you have to always remember we're fitting the style of the video and we're going along with what the video sounds like. And lastly, the last question is, how do you apply whooshes to movements like these? Well, let's go ahead and download a few whooshes and take a look. The first thing we need to understand is, what kind of movements do we have? We have slow movements and we don't have any intense movements. Those are the two things we need to keep in mind. So if we go ahead and open up Epidemic Sound, let's look for some slow whooshes. So this is a long whoosh. This is nice and simple. I like both of these. We can click on download, and you can either download a segment of the sound effect, or you can download the full track. And I'm going to download them. And one more important thing to remember is we're going to be creating our folder over here, and we're going to add a new folder. We're going to call it sound design or sound effects library. Okay, and then we're also going to be qualifying these. So just make sure that you add a folder inside here called whoosh, and then we're just going to add all the kinds of whooshes over here. So this is one of them. Let's just download maybe like 5. So this one's pretty intense. I like this one. This one's pretty quick. So let's go ahead and add this in. Let's download it. This one's very short. This one's very, very intense. We probably won't use it. Okay. Okay. All of these are super intense, and I don't want to go for short intense. I want to go something medium. You know what? It's not bad. We could go for it. These are slower whooshes. We can also make use of these. So let's go ahead and download these. So these are 3 different whooshes we've just downloaded. So let's go ahead and give them a try and see how they, kind of match up with our animations. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go into my sound design folder, which is inside of this. If we go over to, where is it? Sound effects library. I'm just going to add in the entire folder, right? Not just the sound effects, the entire folder. This way it is added in as a bin. So it's a lot more organized. I could double click on this and find all my sound effects here. Now, let's see how we can use our sound effects, right? The best way you can use these is you need to use your source window. To use your source window is you double click on this. It's going to pop up in your source window here. What your source window allows you to do is it allows you to play through it with your playhead. It allows you to play through it like this. Okay, and it also allows you to select in and out points and extract them. So if I want to drag this in, I can just drag my audio only over here. This is my audio icon. It means it's going to drag only the audio. And so if I click on I, it's going to create this kind of barrier here where the before is kind of like dark and the after is light. And if I click on O, it's going to create another barrier here. So these are called in and out points, and everything inside of your in and out points is a selection. So if I just selected all of this and I dragged it in, I've just dragged in what I have selected. And the way we can use this is if we could place our in point before our sound effect and our out point right after it. Since I don't want to drag all 3, I can drag in just this sound effect alone. Okay, so very simple. Let's do that one more time just to make sure that you guys, if you want to clear them, just right click and clear in and out. So if you guys want to do that, just double click on your sound effect, go to your wherever the point you want is, and I'm gonna click on I, and then just move forward until you find the end of the sound effect and click on O, and you're gonna create your in and out points, and you could just drag in this audio like so. With this being said, I want you guys to pay attention to something. So we said whooshes align with movement, right? And if we analyze this movement, if we head back into our effect controls, we analyze these movements. Notice how the movement looks like a wave spiking up, and the whoosh also looks like a wave. So how do you align whooshes? It's very simple. You take your playhead to the point with the most movement, which is right here. So if you focus on this one, for example, the point with the most amount of movement is at this point right here. And since this is the peak of the movement and the point with the most motion blur, you just align the peak or the most intense part of the whoosh with it like this. The reason this works is because whooshes have a build-up and a end, right? So they have a build-up and an end. The build-up builds up to the peak and the end drops down from the peak. The peak is the moment which the movement is the fastest. Like a bullet flying by you, you'll hear a build up, build up, build up, and then as soon as it flies by you, you'll hear that, right? And then it just drops down. So that's the same thing that's happening with whooshes. As we build up, we also want to be able to hear that. So I'm going to unmute my track so we can check that out. And let's go ahead and watch this. There we go. So now one thing you notice as we're playing through this, let's watch through it. The movement is very good, but this whoosh is definitely too slow. And this is just because I have done a lot of sound design. Whereas if you notice this whoosh, for example, this one's a lot faster. So let's go ahead and try and use this whoosh. So all I got to do is double click on this. Let's delete this one. Okay. So I just selected it and clicked on backspace. Let's double click here, put the I point before our sound effect and the O point at the end of it, like so. And then we're just going to drag this sound effect in like this. And once again, guys, right, click on your effect controls, find your peak with your playhead or the moment with the most motion blur, and then just align the peak of this, which is right here, with your playhead like this, right? And let's check this out. That just sounds a lot better. There we go. Nice, super nice. Now, one thing that is confusing me is this top animation. So let's just focus on this bottom one here. There we go. That looks a lot better. Now, if we were going with a more intense animation like this one, we're going to use a different one because now we've got a build up and then we have a big snap. So we have a big point where it's snappy. So none of these are going to work because these are all smooth whooshes, whereas these would definitely work, right? So with this being said, let's add an in point before our sound effect and an out point outside of the sound effect. So I and O, and let's just drag our audio in like this. And once again, we're going to go over to our effect controls. We're going to move our playhead over to the peak. Make sure you have the right layer selected. And we're going to move the peak of this sound effect over to this and check out how this sounds. There we go. Nice. Nice and simple. And notice how this more intense whoosh works perfectly with this more intense animation. And with this being said, guys, let's go ahead and do the whoosh sound effects for these two. And then let's go ahead and practice on our raw footage on the left side over here. All right. So you guys now understand how you should analyze your footage to find your whooshes. You now understand where to get good whooshes. You understand how to align the whooshes to the movement. And now we're going to go ahead and apply this. So the next animation we've got is this kind of pop in from the left side. You guys will notice the most intense point is right at the beginning of the animation. This point over here is the most intense, right? So let's go ahead and add in a whoosh sound effect for it. We're probably going to need something a bit more intense. Something like this would probably work really well. I definitely like this. I really, really like this. So we're going to click an I before this and O after it to create our zone. We're going to drag this audio in, and then all we got to do is go to our effect controls, find the peak, which is right here, but notice the peak here, I still don't see it. Here is the first point that I see it. So this is the actual peak. Because even if it peaked over here before I see the thing, if I don't see it, there's no reason for it to have a sound effect. But as soon as I see it, that's where it's supposed to have a sound effect. So we're going to drag this peak over to here, and we're going to be good to go. Let's check this out. There we go. Look at how cool that looks. Awesome. And then our final one is the scale in, and the scale in is a very smooth whoosh. So we definitely need a very smooth whoosh. So not these harsh ones. We need something very smooth, something like this one. This one is super smooth, and all we have to do is just click on I and O and then select on this, right? Just make sure you drag this thing in first. Select it, go to your effect controls. This is our peak, right here, peak of the movement. Align that with the peak of the whoosh, which is somewhere around here. That looks awesome. And there we go, guys. That is how you sound design movements inside of Premiere Pro. Oops, sorry. Check this out. There we go. Now, if you guys remember when we talked about the fundamentals of our audio back before, like way before these courses, we talked about the volume of your sound effects, and we talked that the volume of your voiceover should be somewhere around -6 to -12. The volume of your music should be somewhere around the -24, and the volume of your sound effects should be -10 or -12. And that's exactly, sorry, -10 or -15. And that's exactly what we should be doing here. So all these sound effects on their own are anywhere between -12. So I would just add a -5 to this one, for example. That just looks a lot better. And then for this one as well, this one's a -6, so I'm going to add a -10 to it since it's more intense. There we go. And then finally this one, This one's a -3, so I would add a -12 to it. There we go. And now if we watch through these are all going to look absolutely amazing. And they're all of a sudden all the same volume as well. There we go. Awesome. Now that we understand how whooshes work and how sound designing whooshes works, let's go ahead and apply this to our video. So real quick, guys, very simple. Use our 3-step sequence. Watch out for the movements, identify what are the movements, and then add the according whoosh to the movement. The first movement we have got over here in the first clip is, this is a sample video. I have a very intense zoom in. If I click on my clip and go to my effect controls, I can see it's super intense early on. So what I need to do is I need to go ahead and add an intense whoosh right off the beginning. And this is the intense whoosh that I've got. I've got this one over here, which actually works really good. Let's go ahead and add it in. Now, if we notice something, I can't move my peak back here because my peak of my video is all the way back here. So this is where the peak is, and then the peak of the whoosh is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my whoosh down over to the peak. I'm just going to place the peak over here. This is a sample. Something like that. I'm going to have that start a bit earlier, like so. This is maybe a bit later, just so we can hear that peak. This is a sample. And it's definitely too harsh, so I'm going to add a -7 to it. This is a sample video. There we go. This is a Look at how much better that looks. There we go. First movement out of the way. A zoom in, depending on where the peak is, just needs a subtle whoosh. It doesn't need a very harsh one. This is a very harsh one for the beginning, so I'm going to add a -5 to it. But it just needs a subtle whoosh like this. This is a sample video. Sample video is... All right, now let's go ahead and get into this. So now we've got two movements happening on the screen. So number one, watch this clip. Sample video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. Number two, ask yourself what kind of movements are happening on the screen. Sample video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. So you guys should be able to deduce that there's two movements happening here, move ins, and there's two movements happening here, move outs. So this is what we're going to be adding the whooshes to. The first whoosh we're going to be adding, excuse me for the low battery on the... boys. All right, the first whoosh that we are going to be adding in is a smooth whoosh for these move ins. So something maybe like this. This is a very slow one. That's also a pretty slow one, but it does the job. So let's go ahead and check out if this fits. Now we're going to click on our effect controls and let's see, we've got our first peak over here. So let's go ahead and add in our sound effect. So let's go back to our source. Let's just drag in this audio like so, and then let's try and align the peak like this. Let's see what happens. The sample video is where I speak. There we go. Now you guys notice something, okay? We are supposed to add two whooshes for these movements. However, because both movements happen at the same time, it's almost like there's two objects moving. And for that reason, you can add two whooshes, but one whoosh just kind of overlays both of them, and it sounds like they're both moving at the same time. Sample video is where I speak, and there we go. So it sounds like there's two objects moving just with this whoosh alone. Even if I tone it down to like -6, sample video is where I speak. Like this. This is a sound effect that overlays both movements, right? If I had a bullet pass by, I would hear a whoosh. If I had two bullets pass by at the same time, I would hear the same whoosh, just louder. If I had one slower than the other, I would hear right? But since they're both happening at the same exact time, I would hear both of them passing by. Now, let's say that one of them happened to be slower. So if I just go into one of these, which is like the effect controls, for example, sorry, the animation here, and I just made one of them way slower, right? Let's just make one of them slower like so. Video is where I All of a sudden, one whoosh is not enough because this thing is way slower. Then I would need to add a second whoosh, and I wouldn't do it this way, but this is just for the sake of example. I would need to add a second whoosh like this. The sample video is where I speak. Notice how it kind of does for the both of them, okay? So you always have to keep this in mind. It depends on what is happening on the screen. So for this case, because both of them are happening at the same time, we're going to go with a single whoosh. Video is where I speak, and I take Once again, there's also an ending, but this one needs a big build-up and a big spike. So we're going to go for this whoosh over here. Something like this, I think is pretty good, or just like the one that we used for the intro. So let's go ahead and add it in, and then we just need a build up, and the spike is all the way at the end over here. So let's go over to our spike, align the peak here, and this is going to be good to go. And I take a few pauses. Sometimes I might even say, there we go. And check this out, because the movement, this other movement, so check out what's happening. This movement is starting at this point. So if we were to add a whoosh, we would need the peak to be at this point here, right? So we need to down here. Like that, okay? And then this movement is ending at this point, so it's moving out of screen. Because we added a whoosh that has a build-up, it builds up for the exit of the first animation and drops down for the entrance of the second animation. It actually fits this scene super nicely. just like so. Sample video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. Sometimes that was completely not planned, but as I was watching through it, I realized, okay, this actually works for both of these. So as we said before, sound design requires you to adapt while you're watching the video. So for this, we have a peak over here. Video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. Sometimes and this kind of acts like a transition, which is honestly perfect. We don't need to add any other sound effects for this because our second movement I was going to say is a pop-up from the bottom. So we need a peak whoosh over here and we need a riser whoosh over here. So something that kind of builds up like and then finishes here. And then this one needs you like that. So something that brings it in. And so both of them together, sometimes I might even say this looks really good. So let's go ahead and watch this from the beginning. This is a sample video. Sample video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. Sometimes I might even say important things like this. Other times I'm probably going to say something absolutely. And for this last one, since it's too subtle, there's no point adding a whoosh. You know, sometimes in life, a lot of things move super slowly, so you don't have to have a sound effect for them. I might even say important things. Let's go ahead and watch through this and check out what the audio sounds like. This is a sample video. Sample video. This is a sample video. Sample video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. Sometimes I might even say important things like this. Other times I'm probably going to say something absolutely useless. So ladies and gentlemen, as you guys can see, all of these together form an amazing, very, very high quality movement. As we mentioned, guys, and as we studied, there are 3 steps to your first stage of sound design, which is the movement, which is probably the most complex one. Not the most complex, but the one that takes the most time. Number 1, you have to analyze all of the movement that is happening on the screen, which is zoom ins, movements in the screen, movements from out the screen into the screen, and scale ins and zoom ins. Right. The second step is you have to find the proper whoosh for it. So you have to go whether you want a longer whoosh, whether you want a more intense whoosh, depending on the kind of animation you have. And the third step finally is you have to align the peak of the whoosh to the peak of your movement that is happening on the screen. And once you do this, guys, you will end up with the best kind of sound design for your movement. Just one thing to keep in mind. Here's a few quick mistakes that beginners make. Number 1, don't spam whooshes. Don't have too many. Like for me, I would just stop here. Like this, even this is way too much, but we're just going to leave it for this. So do not have way too many whooshes. Sometimes you just want to skip animations or just drop its volume really down. And you guys will see how we do this in other editing styles. And number 2, don't use the same whoosh over and over again. You can use it a few times, but don't use it way too many times because it becomes repetitive. And with this being said, guys, that covers your first stage of sound design. And now it's time to move on to stage 2, which is exploring textured sound effects. We're going to take a few examples of what textured sound effects look like, how to sound design them, how to find the right sound effects for them, and then we're going to be applying this kind of idea and mentality into our edit over here and doing the textured sound effects. So guys, without further ado, let's dive right in.